Hello and welcome. My name is Jess, and you're listening to Legaltini, a dynamic, hopefully insightful, and somewhat entertaining podcast documenting my experience getting into law school and following my story in the years to come. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm very excited to share what I have to share with you. So grab your Legaltini and let's take a sip. On this week's episode, we meet Ruth-Ann, who is an attorney working outside of Houston in Spring, Texas, and she is currently working in the elder law world. She actually owns her own firm there, and she is running that. So we have a whole episode here packed with information about starting your own law firm, about what that looks like and how running a business works, and kind of what she does specific to elder law. She's board certified, and so she is really kind of an expert in her field. So I'm very excited to join me in welcoming Ruth-Ann Toups to the show. Ruth-Ann, welcome, and tell us about elder law.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I'm excited to be here. So I am an elder law lawyer. I just got my board certification and certified elder law attorney. So most of my clientele are older, over the age of 65. That's kind of my primary focus. But there's quite a few practice areas that sort of flow out of elder law and kind of flow out, flow in. Estate planning, probate, guardianship, they're all aspects of elder law. So we practice all those areas. And then also, family members often come in and say, hey, I need my will done. So we by no means discriminate. I've got clients from 18 who are going off to college to clients that are 98 and everywhere.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So how did you, and obviously I, have worked in nursing homes for years. So I'm very familiar with this side of the world, but how did you land in elder law? I mean, that seems so random, I'm sure, to a lot of people.
Yeah, it kind of was just complete happenstance. Luckily, it was the marriage of the two areas that I was most interested in law school, which was health law and estate planning. So I took all the classes available kind of in those two fields, and I really wanted a job in health law. And that's what I wanted to pursue. I had a very difficult time when I kind of went to knock on doors to figure out, okay, how do you get into health law? What I found was there were some really cool internships, which I did. I worked for the Attorney General's office in the Medicaid fraud department.
So cool.
Did things like that, which I loved. But what I was told by everyone is, okay, well, now you need to go and kind of do the entry level version of this. Go be a county prosecutor for a few years, which is what my husband does. And I knew I didn't want to go, prosecute DWIs to one day get back to healthcare fraud prosecutions. In administrative law and corporate law, everyone told me you need to go kind of get your chops and get your background. And I was like, it's just not, I don't want to do something I'm not interested in doing to maybe eventually break in. And everyone I talked to that was in health law kind of, it seemed like they ended up there. It wasn't so purposeful. And so the other thing I loved was estate planning, which is another area that's not always super easy to get into as a very young lawyer. And I ended up getting a job that was very close to where I was living in Houston. That was all of those things. There was a Medicaid aspect, which I had a background in by that time. There was an estate planning aspect, and the firm really focused on elder law. And I loved it. I loved the client aspect. I really can't imagine doing anything else. And so it was sort of just the stars aligned kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. That seems like all the right doors kind of opened up. It was close by home. It was all the right things for you. That's so cool. So you had those experiences, and now I understand that you are running your own firm. So tell me about that adventure. I'm sure that it's been a lot, I'm sure.
Not something I really ever thought I would do. Just ended up again, sort of being the right decisions. I think it's funny if I kind of reflect on law school, where I thought I would be when I started law school, which now is a decade ago. If I look back at it, which is scary, a decade ago, where I thought I would be now is so vastly different. I never envisioned working for myself or owning my own firm, but it ended up just feeling like the right thing. And I think a lot of that is just the nature of the type of law I practice. It is small law. There really aren't a lot of big firms that are interested, and it's not super profitable, helping benefits, things like that. I don't do, high net worth estate planning or probate cases, things like that. And so, at some point I said, I think I'd like to do this myself. I think I'd like to take a bite at running the business instead of working for somebody else. And I really love it.
I love that for you. I'm so glad that you love it and that it's a good experience. I think I've heard of some people running their own firms or even just starting their own businesses where they're like, oh my gosh, I did not realize what I was biting off when I bit this off. Have you felt that way at all? Or is it kind of you expected and then everything kind of fell into place the way you expected it to?
Um, I think you wax and you wane in business ownership. So there are times when it feels like, oh, I can't stand this. Like everything, I had a period of this not too long ago where our electricity contract was up on the office, which seems like such a small thing, but like the electricity was up and we were implementing new software and it wasn't going well. And then we had the client problems on top of it. And then we had sugar ants in the kitchen and,
Oh gosh.
and then at home, things were going on. And
Yeah.
there's some days where you come home and I said to my husband, I said, I just want to practice law. Like, I don't want to deal with the sugar ants and the electricity contract.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so there's times when it definitely feels like it is two jobs. There is running the business and then there's practicing law, and they are two completely different jobs and it can be hard to balance them. But I think that the flexibility that I get in return makes it well worth it.
Wow. And well, you mentioned that a decade or however long ago it was that you started law school, that you you didn't envision where you are now at that time, but you went right into law school from undergrad, right?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about that experience and that decision and what led you to want to go to law school in the first place.
It was something that I kind of had always planned since I was even in high school. I did moot court in high school and I loved it. And I was that kid, people were like, you should be a lawyer, and looking back on it, I'm like, was it just because I was a little argumentative maybe? But
I can relate to that.
yes, I think I kind of always had this vision and I had an alternate career path. I interned doing event management of all things and nonprofit association management. And I very well could have pursued a career in that. I ended up there for 2 years. And at the end of college, that was a viable choice, but I kind of had always felt like, okay, law school is what I planned to do. And I was like, I need to do this. I felt really strongly if I didn't do it then, that life was going to take me sideways and I wouldn't ever get to law school. Which I don't know. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I respect, I think, we've talked about this before. I really respect people that take some time. I think a lot of times they're better lawyers right out of the gate because they have more real world experience. I graduated law school, I was 24 years old. At 25, I was managing people.
Right.
I was a baby. Like I've been an intern, but all of a sudden I'm managing staffs of people. I'm making real world decisions that affect people's lives.
Right. That affect real people. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I kind of feel like people should not go straight from undergrad to law school.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I was in it, I was nervous if I didn't,
it would just kind of run away. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. So if you could go back and do it differently, you would have maybe taken some time off if you knew that you were going to end up in law school later.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because I love where I am now. I love that at a pretty young age, I feel pretty settled in a sense. And I think another thing about law school and legal careers that I didn't realize or know is those first couple of years out of school are rough. You graduate and you think, I'm a lawyer, I have a law degree. Your hyper-inflated ego gets deflated for years. You have to sit for the bar and go through that whole process, and then you have to find a job. And then very few people, I really don't know that I can name anyone who loved their first legal job.
Interesting.
It takes a lot of people to kind of like a lot of years to find your footing and to get your confidence, and imposter syndrome is very real. So I don't know, part of me likes where I am right now, and I don't know that I want
Yeah.
to delay that feeling either. So
Well, and you also met your husband in law school, right?
I did, yeah. And so that's another big thing is,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to mess with that too much.
No, don't change
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So were you guys in the same class or were you in different classes?
We were in different sections. We kind of had mutual friends, but really didn't really, I mean, we knew of each other. Where I went to law school was very small. So
Mm,
you knew everybody. I think there were like 120 people in our whole class.
mhm.
So I kind of knew of him, spoke to him a couple times, but wasn't really close with him, which is probably good because I was a little over the top first year, 1L. So probably we agree, probably for the better. And then we studied abroad, and that's where we really kind of understood each
Oh,
other and started dating.
okay. Where did you study abroad?
Oxford.
Oh, amazing. Okay, cool. And you loved that experience? Would definitely recommend it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would, if I could do it again, I would go back. I know my school offered some semester or even year-long study abroad programs. I would go back and do that. I would do it again.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. That sounds so exciting. I just got back from a trip from Ireland and it was amazing. And I kept being like, maybe I should have applied to law school in another country. I don't know. I don't know how that bodes for like job prospects after the fact, but definitely a cool idea.
Yeah, I think you really don't realize like when you're in school, there's no so hard, especially as a lawyer, to ever get the chance again to live somewhere abroad, which is so
Hmm.
different than visiting.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
but
totally.
I wish I would have taken like more advantage of that experience. You can always
Yeah.
take a bar class or, take an extra bar break course to prepare for the bar, but
Right.
living in that place, you're not going to
So
get an
cool.
opportunity like that again.
So cool. Amazing. What did you do for your like first and second summer?
I worked for the AG's office in Oklahoma, Medicaid fraud, and then I went to Oxford. That was my first summer. And then my second summer, I came to the AG's office in Texas. And in Oklahoma, they will let you go, they'll hire you straight out of law school in their white collar crime, healthcare crime.
Cool.
So that's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I came to the Texas AG's office thinking, like, okay, I'll get a leg in the door and I'll get hired. And they were like, oh yeah, you have to have 5 years experience as a like ADA in a county. I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. So
Yikes.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I would still, I mean, I love white collar crime would be awesome, but I don't want to go be, and that's what my husband does. I do not want to be an ADA.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah. Well, and I think you either do or you don't. It's one of those things where there's no like, I guess. I mean, everyone's either like you do or you don't.
yeah.
So looking back to your 3 years as a law student, what just like off the bat do you think of as like advice to a 1L or a 0L coming into school? Like what is your initial thought as far as advice?
I think it's definitely focus on relationships with classmates.
Hmm.
This is something I see actually more 7 or 8 years out than I
Mm-hmm.
did a year or two out. I think in law school, they talk about networking and it seems very forced and uncomfortable. And I think some of this too was just going from undergrad straight to law school, but I really didn't understand networking, what
Right.
that
Like what the point of that is. Yeah.
exactly. And I looked at it as very formal. I looked at
Mm-hmm.
networking as very stiff and, oh, you have to go in and have the talking points. And, we were in a sorority together and you had sorority, you had to hit the points, that's kind of how
Exactly.
I looked
Yeah.
at it, like,
Yeah.
but being a few years out now, there's classmates that I know now, okay, well, they're in this area and they're practicing this, and I can call them for a question. And, I went to law school in a different state, and I get actually a reasonable amount of referrals from law school classmates still. So,
Wow. Okay.
I think not only from the business perspective, but your classmates are going to become your fellow lawyers, your colleagues
Right.
in a few
Right.
years, and also keep that in mind with how you're treating people. But also, I think it's really important just for friendships. Some of my absolute, I met my husband there, but also I met my best friends in law school. It really is. One of our professors told us it's kind of like boot camp. You bond in that
Great.
experience. Yeah, and you really do. So, I mean, I think that that's the most important. That's what really matters to me
Yeah.
again, like a decade out more than
Yeah.
grades. I mean, obviously those things are important. They build, they snowball, they affect your career,
Right.
but relationships are really important too. Don't say no when people invite you to go to dinner or go to breakfast or go to happy hour.
Yeah.
It's important to build those relationships.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think it helps you to keep perspective on like there's other people in the world, there's other stuff going on than just like this casebook and my life.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think that in any challenging scenario, relationships are so important, and like keeping those connections and maintaining some grounding of like, you're a human, I'm a human, we're both going through this together is just so important. Totally agree with that. Would you do anything different going back in law school? I know we talked about like the timing of law school, but as far as like classes you took, study groups you joined or didn't join, anything like that come to mind?
Oh gosh, I would do so many things differently.
Oh gosh.
Full hindsight.
Okay, okay.
Um,
I
something,
mean, hindsight is 2020, so it's all,
yeah,
it's all good.
I think that first semester, once it's all said and done, you feel, at least I felt like it would have been so much easier if I had just known where we were going from the beginning. Like
Okay.
I felt that way particularly about like common law as a class that I really felt that way about. But the Socratic method and like the way that you learn in law school is bit by bit, case by case, build on each other. But for me,
Right.
if I had had the 10,000-foot view
Mm-hmm.
on day one, it would have been so much easier then to work backwards. And the last day of con law, my 1L year, right before the final, the professor put up this chart that explained the entire semester and all the different like types of scrutiny. And I was like, are you kidding me? There was a chart the whole entire time. There was a chart. And when we read these
Oh my
cases, I could have been
gosh.
like, here's where it fit in the chart.
Yeah, here's where we are on this map. Like, can you share that with me? Do you
Yeah.
still have your
So
con law chart?
I probably do, but what I wish I would have known is get some bar prep materials. Bar already hands out the like free books, they want you to
Mm-hmm.
sign up to pay for their class or whatever, but get some of those bar prep materials and read those in the week or two before you start school to get
Okay.
a 10,000-foot view. So when you go to school, you learn by case law, Socratic method, and it's good. It teaches you how to be a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
not really like learning a lot of the law necessarily. And then you
Mm-hmm.
go to study for the bar, and the bar teaches you the law and teaches you how to study for the bar. And in some ways, it was way more direct and made way more sense than the way we learned it in law,
Right.
which I still think there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
value to. But
Yeah.
that's my biggest practical piece of advice when people ask me about school. I'm like, yeah, don't struggle through it. Get some study aids and do them first.
Okay.
You kind of know where you're going. And I think, with study groups, just be careful that they're not doing more harm than good. I think
Okay.
sometimes study groups are great, but I think you have to really know what kind of a learner you are and know if, I think like you said about being grounded in law school, you can really easily lose that.
Mm-hmm.
And people can get very hyped and very, especially 1L, and grades are so important, and competitiveness. And, sometimes being in those groups are doing you more harm than good.
Yeah, I think sometimes that anxiety is contagious. And
Mhm.
if you're like feeling really cool, calm, and collected about something and someone else is freaking out, then you start to kind of question your collectedness and start panicking of, oh gosh, why am I not stressing about that? And yeah, I definitely can. I can relate to that in my like professional life where I'd be like, okay, we've got this. We've got a handle on this situation. And someone comes to my office and is like, the world is exploding, the sky is falling, all these things. And I'm like, oh, wait, should I be panicking more? So yeah, I think that's maybe where the relationships with people outside of law school comes in, and keeping that perspective of, your world isn't falling apart. So my world is not really falling apart.
Absolutely.
So with the stress and intensity of law school, how do you cope with that? How do you manage getting through this like chosen level of anxiety all day, every day?
Yeah, I just focused on the things that I enjoy doing. I worked out a lot in law school. I was actually in better shape than I am now for sure, because I had the
Mm-hmm.
time. You can go to the gym at 3 p.m. So take advantage
Right.
of that, enjoy kind of like living abroad, enjoy that phase of life.
Yeah.
And I enjoy cooking, and I enjoy cooking. I'm very pragmatic in the sense that it's enjoyable, but it's also purposeful because there's
Right,
meal
right.
at the end.
There's
Um,
food at the end.
yeah, and then I had a job through law school that helps, and again with like kind of that grounding. But
Yeah.
I think having activities and things outside of school, and for me having, you know, I can get competitive and stressed, and for me having things that weren't so much achievement driven, if that makes sense. Like for me being in like a competitive sport or something like that, I know some people did intramural sports and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want the extra achievement stress. Like I want to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
when I'm not working on something.
yeah. That makes sense.
And also
I mean, yeah.
structure and boundaries. That is one of my biggest things. And everybody works differently. Like my husband and I are completely opposite, with the way that we
Mm-hmm.
study, with the way we practice law now.
Mm-hmm.
What he did and what I did were very different. But what works for me is knowing kind of the hours that I'm at school.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think if you have worked in the past, it makes this easier. If you law school
Yeah.
a job and work it, work 7 to 7 or whatever you want your hours to be. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
done, close your book and walk away, and kind of create that mental and physical separation.
Yeah. What was like a maybe sample or close to what your schedule was your first year of law school? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember. I figured out during my first year of law school that I was better in the mornings, which was kind of a revelation to me. In my teens and early 20s, that was not me, but law school is where I first figured out I really functioned better in the morning.
Interesting.
So I would wake up pretty early, like between
Okay.
like 5 and 6. I would do better
Mm-hmm.
if I read something for class right before going to class,
Mm-hmm.
which, in some ways was me, in some ways was not me. I'm not a huge procrastinator. And so I didn't always
Mm-hmm.
like the deadline, but I did like having it kind of like fresh in my mind. So I would get up, I'd read, I'd go to class. My first year, they picked the like schedule for you. So I had a lot of weird breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not do a great job in retrospect of capitalizing on those breaks. I
Hmm.
definitely think other people in my class did a better job of saying, okay, I've got an hour and a half before my next class. I'm just going to go to the library. I often was like, oh, we'll go to the bagel shop. We'll go to the coffee shop. We'll
Yeah.
study. And
Yeah.
by the time
Oh,
you
well,
get
we'll take
there,
a break during those breaks.
exactly. So I learned after my first semester that really when you have the breaks, go to the library. So at night you're actually done.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's my plan is to view everything kind of like a full-time job and do, 12, 14-hour day of whatever needs to be done and like try to really bookend it and say, now I'm done and now is my evening. Because I think it's hard to build those boundaries. And I think a lot of people have experienced that with remote work with after
Mhm.
COVID and during COVID, that, your living room is now also your office. And so you just kind of keep your laptop open, you keep answering the emails and you keep working, and all of a sudden it's 10 p.m. and you're like, oh, I guess I'll go to bed now.
Exactly. Yeah. My first year of practice, I didn't have an office and I worked out of my house and would drive to clients, and I could not wait to get an office.
Mm-hmm.
The first few months working from home was awesome. It was great.
Right.
And then it was like, man, I miss seeing other people. And yeah, I would look up, my husband works pretty late. I'd look up and it would be like 8 o'clock and I was still working. And it burns you out really quick.
Right. Yeah. There's something about closing like your office door, getting in a car, driving home that creates a work is over, evening time is now. I don't know that I think people have lost with that. And I worry about that with law school, just, knowing that I'm going to be studying and reading into the evenings and that's the expectation that I have. But where do I draw that line, or where do I kind of create a boundary? And I think it's probably just different for everyone, depending on how fast of a reader you are and how much time you need for it.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. One of the struggles I think of law school is that the structure of it and the nature of it is you're never really done. It's not like you have
Hmm.
assignments and tests and midterms and you're working toward this. you have the whole semester and one big final at the end. And it
Right.
is how well you comprehensively understand the entire semester. And so
Yeah.
for me, there was really never enough, you know, like you could read the case and then you could brief the case and then you could work on your outline and then you could consult some other resources, and
Mm-hmm.
you could do as much or as little as you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things I struggled with in law school, and especially studying for the bar exam, was there's never a point where you really feel like, okay, I've mastered this. Like, it's
Yeah.
even in the practice of law, like you never feel like a complete master or expert.
Right. Right. Yeah. It just, and I'm sure everything keeps evolving, and like rules and statutes, like everything kind of keeps changing and moving. And especially when you get into the nitty gritty of different, like specific kinds of law, everything is always kind of changing. I experienced that a ton in healthcare with regulations, especially during COVID. It seems like every week there was a new book of regulations, and they're like, just kidding, forget everything you knew. Now it's this. And I'm sure that that is the case in law as well.
Absolutely. And I think in practice, I'm more comfortable with it because it makes honestly my life more exciting. You know, I know
Yeah.
things will evolve over time, which is cool to see. And there's some advocacy built into that. But in law school, it was the opposite. It was like, can you just stay still? Can you not be a
Right.
moving target for a
Right.
couple days?
Exactly. Can you just stay still? I love that. That's too funny. What surprised you most about law school? Was there anything that you feel like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that? Or was everything pretty much
I will say, I don't think this is totally unique to my school. I think it happens at other schools too, but I think the coupling was surprising to me, how many
okay?
people found a spouse in law school.
Interesting.
I think we counted one time, it was like 12 or 15 couples out of our class, which was not a huge class.
That is a huge number of people.
Yes, so I think that
Wow.
that was surprising. I did not go to law school expecting to find a spouse by any means,
Right.
but a lot of people did.
Huh. Well, and I'm interested in the concept of like dating in law school, because I'm obviously dating someone and he's moving with me to law school. And so I think that'll be a really interesting and exciting experience, kind of like a new adventure. And but yeah, I've heard that it can be kind of a challenge just to kind of communicate to all your loved ones and people around you what you're going through and what's, what your experience is, because it's different than everything else. And you're going to be way more stressed out and have your schedule totally shifted and changed, and your priorities are changed. And I don't know. So I think the biggest advice I've heard from that, and maybe you have some good advice, although your spouse was in school with you, on the best advice I've gotten is just to like really communicate about what your needs are, and like what the expectation that you have for, not for that person, but for your experience of like, here's what I think it's going to be like, and so here's what you can do to kind of help me. But I don't know, have you heard any good advice, or do you have any advice for people that are dating in law school?
I mean, I think that's probably more general relationship advice, which is just it's all about communication. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, I will say my then boyfriend, now husband, in law school, I think I mentioned we're just very different. We're so different in the way we studied. We only took a couple of classes together. Um, that weren't great experiences. We practice
Yeah.
law very differently. So I mean, while we were both in school, we both had very, very, very different approaches. And so I think that there was a period of time for us after that honeymoon phase, everything is great, we kind
Hmm.
of settled in, was kind of respecting each other's systems and
Mm.
how the other person worked. And I don't think we necessarily even mastered that in law school. I think it was later, into the first year or two of our careers. He's a late night worker. I'm an early morning worker. He does better on a deadline. I do better with plenty of time. I like silence.
Hmm.
He likes noise.
Yeah.
So I think anybody, whether you're in school or not, don't try to force your way of doing things on somebody else. And I think that
Yeah.
a lot of the first year of law school is just figuring out what works for you. It is such a different experience. And also, I think, with law school, like there's not a lot of preparing you can necessarily do. So you
Right.
kind of like you kind of need to just spend some time like figuring out, how do I do this?
Right, exactly. I think that that is like the big piece that
not that I have like fear about, but that I'm just acutely aware of, is that like nothing can prepare you for this. Like you just have to go and do it. And it's part of the challenge. And it's part of what makes people great lawyers, is going through this really tough, mind numbing, experience. And I don't know, I think that's just part of the adventure and part of the fun.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I definitely look back on it favorably, like maybe
Mhm.
not in the moment, but I look back now, I'm like, man, that was such a great time in my life.
Yeah,
You really were kind of united with this group of people. You're going through this special experience. You were all learning the same thing. I mean, you never really get that kind of experience again where you're in that sort of like group unity sort of setting.
so true. Yeah, I don't think you ever really get that back.
Yeah.
So
In the
true.
moment, though, it sucks. In the moment, you're like, I can't wait for this to be over. And then it was over.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, I could go back to that.
Okay, so kind of enjoy it while you're in it. And okay, so to kind of wrap up what you've shared is focus on your relationships, enjoy it while you're in it, respect other people's processes and let them do the things that they need to do. Running a firm is two jobs, running a business and running as a lawyer. What were the other major points?
Boundaries, I think
Oh, boundaries, yes.
about, your boundaries with your work when you're shutting it off, boundaries with spouses or boyfriends, girlfriends. I think
Yep,
boundaries are super important, and knowing and figuring out your own, if your study group's working or not working,
totally.
that's a lot of success, I think, is boundaries.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Ruth-Ann, thank you so much for your time. This has been really lovely getting to chat with you and hearing your experience and sharing your wisdom from your decade of experience. If a listener wanted to get in touch with you, maybe they're interested in elder law, maybe they're just interested in what you shared, how would they get in touch with you?
I have a Facebook and an Instagram, Toups Law. I am not the best at updating it, so we don't post
Okay,
it. But I do respond to messages. You can always shoot me an email too. And I
perfect.
can send you my email. You can put it in the comments.
Yeah, I can put it in the bio. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
but I'm always happy to, grab lunch or coffee or Zoom and talk about my experience, and always
Yeah,
looking for interns too. So yeah, if anybody's interested,
perfect.
it's can be hard to get in, and I'd love to help someone get into the world
Yeah,
of law.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again. Appreciate your time. Loved chatting with you.
Absolutely.
Well, that is all that I have for this week's episode of Legaltini. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out my Instagram, which is at legaltini_podcast, and check out my website, which is legaltini.com. There's all sorts of resources on there for you. And please rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening. That's super helpful to me. That is everything that I've got for y'all. So thanks for listening to Legaltini, your very own sip of law school.